Okay. As usual, a couple of things before looking back at materials. One of them is I will remind you that I asked not to have gadgets open. Put the gadgets away. A lot of this is the wedge of destruction that occurs after one of these. So you may be able to keep your mind, your attention on the gadget and still learn things, but the people behind you, their eyes go in, they go into zombie mode staring at the screen. So I prefer no gadgets. All right, I guess, I'm not going to go spend my time enforcing this. A few things about the online world. First off is, with Orion, some of you answered 20 questions, were given the option to call it a day on Orion, to click I'm done, whatever. And once you do that, yes, you can go back and look at questions you marked for review to see what was right, what was wrong, but you can't do Orion anymore. It blocks your re-entry. So a simple solution to this was just to assign it a second time. If you're happy, if you just keep on answering questions on Orion, I don't think you ever have to press you're done. I think the score just goes to me at the end of the semester. So there's no need for you to click you're done. You can see which ones you're getting right and wrong as you go along by looking for the green and red bars showing up to the right. But long and short of it is I just set it out again as a second assignment, which you can ignore perfectly safely. For those of you who did click you're done and want to continue to play with the Orion questions. Any questions about Orion questions? The other thing is the problem set, which is due on Wednesday. This first problem set, I'm going to be completely lenient on this, as with the first Orion. My goal is not to grade you guys finally. My goal is to teach you. And so this first problem set, first Orion, basically it's going to be pass-fail, give or take a smidge. So just do it and whatever. There's the issue of working together. You're welcome to work together on problem sets. Talk among yourselves. You're welcome to come talk to me about them. Again, I have office hours this afternoon and on Wednesday morning. This afternoon I'm in Alderman Cafe, 3 to 5. Wednesday morning I'm in my office, 9 to 11. Talk to other people about these. Don't just get stuck on them and throw up your hands and guess. The purpose of the problem sets, there's a little bit of a grading aspect to them, but the other thing is just to learn the material, and you learn it well or better or best by talking about it with other people. Prove that you know the right answer, and why. There is the issue of getting too much help, but it's self-enforcing. There have always been some people who just get the answers from their friends, and they do surprisingly well on the homeworks and then surprisingly badly on the exams. It's completely predictable. Happens every year. Okay? Any questions about problem set stuff? All right. That'll do it. So sort of where I left off, looking at ramps. I've shown you that objects sitting on ramps tend not to go into them or off them. There's a negotiation that takes place so that the object, for example, a cart, a wagon, sits right on the surface of the ramp. And left to itself, that is nothing else pushing on it, it will tend to accelerate down the ramp. And that acceleration comes about because when you look at the forces acting on the individual forces acting on say the wagon, there are two of them, neglecting any things like air issues. The two forces are its weight straight down and a support force from the ramp, which is not straight up. It's at an angle because it's at right angles to the surface, which isn't horizontal. So that support force is up and cockeyed. And those two forces together sum to something that's not zero. They can't cancel. They can't sum to zero. Instead, they sum to a downhill ramp force. And that ramp force, I was having a discussion with someone before class, because it originates in weight, really, it scales with the mass of the object. And so if you have a wagon with just a little kid in there, it accelerates down at a certain rate in response to that ramp force. If you put a heavy kid in the wagon with the little kid, So now the mass went way up, and that by itself would slow the acceleration of the wagon. But the ramp force also went way up. Why? Because the ramp force originates in the weight, that downhill force that's not perfectly canceled by the support from the ramp. Together, you end up with a ramp force, and it's bigger now. So the more massive gang of kids also has a stronger downhill ramp force, and they perfectly compensate for one another. And the acceleration, if I aim this right, is the same as before. So whether the big kid's in or the big kid's not in, same acceleration. And this is, for example, why these various downhill sports, there are lots of them. Whether you're rolling in some sort of cart or it's a toy cart rolling down a slot in the slot cars, or a skier going downhill. It's fair because the more massive person, yeah, they've got a bigger downhill ramp force, but they also have more mass fighting acceleration, so it compensates. So, for example, downhill skiing is, you don't know whether the light person or the heavy person is gonna get there first. It's got, the issues aren't just simple physics ones. Okay? Any questions? Incidentally, having mentioned skiing, I should finish the job here. The downhill alpine event, if there were no friction and no air resistance, the person would go faster and faster. They would accelerate the whole time. They're basically a wagon on a ramp. They'd go faster and faster, and they would hit the bottom. They would reach the bottom traveling at a tremendous, dangerously fast speed. They don't because of air resistance and friction. And they reach what's effectively a terminal velocity, which is determined by the point at which that downhill ramp force is completely canceled by uphill stuff, friction or air resistance, which is why they go into tight tucks. You know, they're going down trying to look as little as possible to the air, because if they can get rid of that air resistance, they'll keep accelerating, they'll go faster. And that's part of the story. Okay? You can find 50 different examples of the same stuff just showing up in different applications in real life. All right, so we got stuff going on the ramp. If you balance that downhill ramp force by pulling uphill equally hard, well then of course the wagon stops accelerating. That doesn't mean it's motionless, it just means it's inertial. If it was motionless, it stays motionless. If it was heading uphill, it continues uphill at a constant velocity. Same with downhill. Well, finally that brought us to the issue of, so ramps are interesting because they allow you to lift really heavy things by going along the ramp. It doesn't take a very strong push up the ramp to make the very heavy thing go up the ramp, and you can eventually get it to your second floor apartment. But what's the trade-off? And the trade-off is distance. You have to go along a very long ramp. So if your goal is to get to the second floor apartment, you know, Juliet up there, we'll get there. Romeo can go over here to the ladder and climb up nice and fast, or can go along. I'm thinking of the Paralympics, the Para-Shakespeare, when Romeo has to go up the ramp. And don't get me in political. No, I'm trying to be good here. It's a long ramp, very gradual ramp. So Romeo gets there. They all die in the end. It's really grim. But by traveling a long distance, having exerted a small force. So, you know, what's the consistent thing here? And the consistent thing, it turns out, and where I'm headed, is energy. And so I got started in this last time, and I want to make sure it's as clear as possible to you all. Because energy, the real physics energy, is an enormously useful concept, not just in physics, but in life in general. And as I said early in day one, you guys are facing a lot of complicated societal issues that revolve finally around energy. In my day, there was this energy crisis in the sense that the politics of energy was messy. Right now, the science of energy is problematic. It's not who controls, for example, oil. It's that this stuff is a problem for our environment. So, learning really what energy is matters. The word is used everywhere in ways that don't have anything to do with physics. So here it is. What energy is again, it's a conserved quantity, which conserved quantities in physics or in nature in general, in the universe, are very rare things. These are physical quantities that when you add up the grand total everywhere, that total never changes. It's just always the same. And within a small region, for example, the energy in this room, it cannot change except by importing or exporting energy. That is, unless somebody brings in energy, a charged battery, a wound spring, a jelly donut, the energy in this room is absolutely stuck, absolutely fixed. It can move around within us. It can change forms in various ways, but you can't change the total amount, and for very deep physical reasons. The conservation of energy has ultimately to do with the observation that the physics now is the same as the physics. If I juggle and do whatever, if I juggle, we're in trouble. But if the physics of juggling would be the same now as it would be 10 minutes from now or 10 minutes in the past. It turns out that each time there is some symmetry of nature, that is some way in which nature has, it's a continuous symmetry, way in which nature doesn't change when you do something continuous, like when you go forward, backward in time. That gives rise to a conserved quantity, and the conserved quantity is energy. The fact that the physics here is the same as the physics here, this continuous thing, gives rise to another conserved quantity that we'll encounter in about a week. It's known as momentum. And the fact that the physics when I'm facing you is the same as the physics when I'm turning this way, the physics now for me is the same as it was over here. That gives rise to yet another conserved quantity, the third that we'll deal with this semester, and it's known as angular momentum. So, energy has to be conserved. If it weren't, this would reflect a complete change in the way we view our universe. And what can you do with a conserved quantity? Well, the fact that it is a conserved quantity, I mean, first of all, in the near future, I have to give you an indication of what you can do with the stuff. But the fact that it's a conserved quantity means you can watch it move from one thing to another. And the mechanism for moving it, in fact, specifically the mechanical means for moving energy, is a process known as work, or an act known as work. You do work on something, you move energy to it. And the reason I put the word mechanical in is because there is a second way to move energy. It's the thermal way. It turns out that the temperature is associated with energy. Hotter things actually have more of a type of energy. It's not very useful, but it's there. And you can move energy from one thing to another thermally by letting heat flow into it. But okay, go back to the mechanical. So that's it, two ways, mechanical and thermal. The mechanical means for transferring energy is all about doing work. And technically, energy is the capacity to do work, and work is the mechanical means for transferring energy, and that's totally circular and not very satisfying. But we'll get it clearer as we go. So to do work on this bowling ball and thereby give it energy, this precious conserved thing, I have to exert a force on it. This is the rules, no exceptions. You have to exert a force on it, and it has to move a distance in the direction of the force. So if I push it upward, which I'm doing now, and it moves upward, which it's doing now, I did work on it. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter whether I'm sweating or not sweating. It doesn't, in fact, you don't even have to look at me at all. You just look right here. I think of it as sort of a microscopic story. Am I doing work? Well, this is me, okay? You zoom in, you look through a cardboard tube. You look at, he's pushing up on it, that's part one. Yeah, we're close. And is it moving upward? Yes. Story's over. I am doing work on it. It doesn't matter, anything else outside that cardboard tube image doesn't matter. For example, if I'm in an elevator and I'm holding this up, I'm the new delivery person, and you've ordered out a room service, a bowling ball. And so up I'm going, your butler, I'm still doing work on it, which is to say I am still transferring energy from me to it. Because, just picture us here. This is the Mike Myers version. right? Okay, so you watch me in the elevator. And up I went. The bowling ball moved up. It's not me. It's not about me. It's about the bowling ball. I pushed up on it, and it moved up. I did work on it. In that case, though, where we're riding the elevator is doing work on me, right? It pushed up on my feet, and I moved up. So the energy actually went through me. I'm a conduit. Whereas this, I'm actually a source. Still, I did work on the bowling ball in both cases. You okay with that idea? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right now I am not doing work. Why not? That's right, of my push, of my force. Yeah, the bowling ball is not moving in the direction of my force. So I am holding this up, and previously I was holding up like this, and I'm getting all sweaty and stuff. And it's really tempting to say, well, I'm doing work. No, I'm not doing work on the ball, because its energy is not changing. What I'm doing is I'm turning energy that's in me, that came in my breakfast cereal. I'm turning that into thermal energy in me. This is a matter of more physiology than physics. I'm not a very good statue. So if I have to stand here all day like this, I'm going to be a mess, because I'm going to be turning energy in me into thermal energy in me. It started as calories. There was this wonderful period when one of the major cranberry drink commercial sources was pitching their food as more food energy than any other drink. And that was supposed to be good. Another word for food energy is calories, right? The highest calorie beverage on the market. Yeah. So they were told to change. That was like in my childhood. The point is that when you eat food, you are consuming, you are importing a form of energy that's quite useful. And as you sit here holding the ball up hour after hour, you are converting that useful food energy into thermal energy, which I'll talk about more pretty soon. It's a disordered form of energy in you. It's still energy and all that, but you can't do as much with it because it's shattered, it's fragmented into lots of little pieces that don't get their act together. Yeah. So if I were riding the elevator, so I'm already going up, and I extend my arm, then the work done on the ball would be the product. It's actually a quantitative thing. The product of how hard I push, the force, times the distance it traveled. And because I'm going up in the elevator, there's a good distance already, and I extend my arm, there's even more distance. So the amount of work being done during that little vignette is quite large. Partly it came through me from the elevator, and partly it came from me in the act of extending my arm. The ball gets it all. It doesn't care where it came from. That's the microscopic story looking through the tube. It doesn't care whether the elevator did it or whether I did it, or both. But it's all transferred in there. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So Alessandra's question is what if you go, the motion is more complicated. So for example, I push up, let me make a simple one here. I push up and it's moving up and to the right. All that counts is the component, the portion of its movement that was in the direction of my force. So as I walk at constant velocity and lift it at constant velocity, in which direction am I pushing on the ball? You should all have a sense of this. Which direction was I pushing the ball? Straight up. Because the ball was coasting, if I did it right. If I was truly moving the ball at constant velocity, the ball has net force 0. It has a weight down. My push has to be straight up. I'm simply supporting the ball's weight, even though it's doing this more complicated rampy motion. Okay? Only the upward component of its movement counts, because I pushed up. Its movement left and right is irrelevant, because that's at right angles, orthogonal, perpendicular to the direction of my force. That part is out. This is one of these separations of life into pieces, like throwing a ball at an angle. Only the vertical part is falling. The horizontal part's coasting. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yeah, so your question is when I go and push against the wall, I can push as hard as I want to. I'm doing no work, right? And the answer is that's correct. You do no work pushing on something that doesn't move. And it has to travel a distance in the direction of my force for me to do work on it. This is, do I have a, I don't have a, this is not the world's bounciest ball. In fact, it's the world's least bounciest ball. Baseballs are designed not to bounce, which is what we'll come up to. But the reason things bounce, I'm frustrated. Visualize the basketball. Okay, it comes right back at me. One of the reasons, one of the ways of thinking about why it came back to me, why didn't it just hit and drop like a sack of potatoes? The reason is it hit, it could not do work on the wall. Why couldn't it do work on the wall? Tell me. The wall doesn't move. In that scenario, that's the wall doing work on the basketball? No, the wall does nothing. The wall is essentially immovable. Therefore, the ball does no work on it. The wall pushes on the basketball, but the surface that touches the wall, the wall does no work on the surface that touches the basketball because that's not moving either. Balls are not rigid objects. They have to dent as part of their life, part of their reality. So the point is that no work is occurring at that surface of contact, neglecting the tiny movements that are present there, which is another part of a more complicated story. The result is whatever energy the ball had coming in, it has going out. This is where bounces come from. The fact that most balls are bouncy, and what bouncy means, and what we'll see shortly, because we actually will talk about bouncing balls. Literally, that's one of my topics. The act of bouncing is an act of storing energy during an impact and then returning that energy in the form of motion after the impact. So really nice bouncy balls are ones that store energy well and return it well, whereas what I call dead balls that don't bounce, non-lively balls, are ones that turn that energy into thermal energy, get rid of it, and effectively squander it, and don't bounce well. For example, a beanbag. A baseball, it turns out, is a relatively dead ball, which is why I got frustrated. Basketball, much better. What you call a bouncy ball, I used to call a super ball, are particularly good at storing and returning energy. Is that okay? So pieces I've got to make sure I get along to you. I've told you this is doing work on the ball, and that just holding it here is doing no work because it's not moving. Or walking at constant velocity is doing no work on it because, I'm going to stop, because although it's moving at right angles to my force. So again, it doesn't count either. So far we're okay with that stuff? The last one is the coming down. So when I'm pushing up, but I lower it at approximately constant velocity, so then I'm sucking energy out of it. Yeah. So yes, Savannah's question is something coming at you really fast, and you push on it and slow it down, but it still goes past you or runs you over. Did you do work on it? What you did was a negative amount of work on it. You definitely, because you pushed it and it moved a distance relative to that force, you did worky stuff on it. The amount you did was a negative amount. And I'm suffering over the language here because when I talk about doing work, it has become standard convention. among physicists and beyond engineers, that when you do work, you are referring to a positive amount. So this is a positive amount of work, which means that I gave energy to the ball. This is a negative amount of work because I pushed up on it as it moved opposite my push. It was definitely in a direction that counts, along the push, but the wrong way. So I did a negative amount on it, which means I gave it less than no energy. I sucked energy out of it. It gave me energy. Another way to look at it is from its perspective. The ball is pushing down on my hand as my hand descends. That is, moves in the direction of the ball's push on me. From its perspective, it gave me positive energy. And actually, this is why energy, well, one way to look at why energy is conserved. In every energy exchange, any piece of work, there's a full transaction. I give the ball energy on the way up, and let me re-show you on the way up again. From its perspective, it's pushing down on my hand as my hand moves up. It gave me negative energy. So the transaction is complete. I gave it 10 units of energy. It stole 10 units from me. It works out perfectly. That's what energy is conserved. It really does move from one thing to the other. And my analogy with money works just fine. That if you give someone $10, they receive, so you give them $10, their money goes up. At the same time, they take $10 from you, your money goes down. It's a complete transaction. Okay? And, yeah. Okay, so to do work on something, you have to be in contact with it. You have to be exerting a force on it. And the forces we've talked about up until now, and probably for the rest of the semester, will be ones in which you touch. So once I let go of the ball, I can't do any more work on it because I can't touch it. But you know about electric charge, for example, can travel through empty space. And you can push on things. You've had static cling problems. Then you're doing work. You know, with static cling counts, it's a force. These are forces. So if you can, or magnets, you can push on something with a magnet. You're doing work on it. Yeah. Okay. So I said that when I was walking, I'm at baseball time of class. Okay. So when I'm going at constant velocity to the right, I'm pushing straight up on it, right? So its movement is horizontal while I'm pushing straight up. Those are at right angles to each other. I'm doing no work on it. So far, so good? If I want to accelerate those, this is your question. If I want to accelerate, so I'm going faster and faster, in which direction am I pushing the ball during the period of acceleration? I'm pushing it up to support its weight and in the direction I'm making it go faster and faster. So my force on it's kind of at a cockeyed angle like this. The portion of that force that's in the direction of its movement counts. So I was doing work on it. You follow that idea? So the act of throwing a ball involves doing work on the ball because you are pushing it horizontally and it is moving horizontally. And if you watch people throwing, there's in part getting the ball to go really fast. It means to make it carry with it a lot of energy associated with motion, which has the name kinetic energy. Having spent ages on that first drawing, I'll shift to this one. Kinetic energy is the energy of an object that is moving. Any direction counts. Energy has no direction to it. So one thing to remember here, you'll see why I'm pointing this out now in a week, maybe give or take. Energy has no direction to it. It's not about moving, it's about doing. But an object that is moving carries with it energy. Whether it's moving fast to the right or moving fast to the left, who cares? It's certainly able to do stuff. So it has energy it didn't have when it was motionless. And the name for that energy is kinetic energy. That's whatever. So the act of trying to invest energy in a ball, and as much energy as possible, which is associated with making the ball travel as fast as possible, involves big forces, big distances, whatever you can do. It's hard to throw a ball at high speed with a tiny little windup flip it like that. That involved pretty big force, but I only had a couple inches to move it. That sucks. You can't really throw a ball. So good pitchers, which I'm not, they're practically on the ground back here to get started. They want as much distance as they can get. They're going to push as hard as they can get their arms to push on that ball, and they'll keep it going the whole way because they want to invest as much energy as they can. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when I'm holding the ball and I am accelerating to your right, I'm doing work. And the reason I'm doing work is, in order to accelerate to the right, the ball won't do it on its own. I have to push it. So I'm going to have sort of two forces on the ball. One up to support it, and one at the back to speed it up. It's the one at the back that counts. That's the one that is pushing it and it moving in the direction of that push. That's the one that counts. And sort of actually completing the series of thoughts, when you throw a ball, you're investing energy into it. Think about when you catch the ball. It's very hard to catch a ball without moving your hands, and it's undesirable. If you catch a ball coming at you, I catch like a clam here. My sister, the jock, always laughed at me and my inability to catch things. So if I try to catch it without moving my hands, it bounces off my hands. What you want to do to catch a ball is let it do work on you. Let it push down on you or forward on you and move in the direction of its push. That sucks the energy out of it and brings it to rest. So people, good receivers in sports are people with soft hands that let the ball do work on them and take the energy out gently. Other questions or thoughts? Yeah. Okay, so Victoria's question is when I push up on the ball, until the moment I let go, I actually am doing work on it. Because if I just hold my hand here, I'm exerting an upward force on it equal to its weight. This whole movement, even though it gets a little complicated, in general, I'm still going to be pushing up on the ball with a force in the ballpark of its weight. It's an upward force. Okay? So in the act of throwing it, during this entire time from down here till it leaves my hand, I'm pushing up on it, and it's moving up. I'm investing energy into it. That energy shows up in two forms as I go up this way. One is its height is increasing, and I'll come back to that. And the other is that its speed is increasing. To the extent that its speed is increasing, it's accumulating energy in the form of its energy of motion, kinetic energy. As far as its height is concerned, it's accumulating energy in the form of what's gravitational potential energy. Potential energies, there are many of them. Let's see. Again, energy is the capacity to do things. It's the conserved quantity of doing things. The energy can be immediately visible in the form of motion. It can be subtle in the form of stored or potential energy in the forces between or among things or within things. So in this case, when I lift that ball upward, even at constant velocity, I am stretching, sort of, figuratively, stretching the force of gravity. The ball and the earth are trying to get as close as they can to each other. And I am pulling them apart like stretching a rubber band, right, by lifting the ball up. And that stores energy in them. If I let go, the ball way up high has the capacity to do things that it didn't have when it was on the floor. So the act of lifting it upward, which takes a force, right? I got to push the whole up and stretch that force of gravity, is investing energy in the force between the ball and the earth. Now, because the earth is so nearly immobile because of its enormous mass, we traditionally assign all the energy, all that potential energy, we forget that it's really between the earth and the ball, and it's in these forces between them, and we assign it to the ball itself. So the ball's gravitational potential energy goes up. And then when you drop it, the ball's gravitational potential energy goes down. And it's actually being converted from gravitational potential energy to kinetic. The ball's converted one form of energy to another. That's one of the things that's true about energy as a conserved quantity, is that it's conserved, meaning that you can't make it or destroy it, but you can change forms. It can go from one form to another, and that's fine. So in this case, it's going from gravitational form, so I'll let it go, okay, to kinetic form, right until the impact. At the impact, it goes into other forms in the ball and comes back out as kinetic again to some extent, and on and on. Is that okay? Yeah. If it goes back to kinetic, doesn't that mean the floor did work on it? Actually not, because the ball never lost the energy. The ball has the energy now. Right. I'm not contributing or adding or subtracting now. Right. I'm just simply holding it in place. I'm doing no work. There's no transaction between me and the ball. When I let go, the story is completely the ball's energy. The ball has energy and gravity. I'll tell you before I do it because it happens fast. The ball's energy is entirely gravitational right now. As it drops, it is touching nothing except the earth, and it will convert it, not even the earth, it's touching nothing except gravity. It's converting its gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy as it descends. When it hits the floor, it can't do any work on the floor because the floor won't move. So what it does is it turns its kinetic energy at the moment before impact into energy of various forms inside the ball, some of which are elasticy things. If it were a bouncy ball, it would be going into like a spring. And then it jumps off the floor on its own with whatever elastic energy it has left, which isn't much for a baseball. And it's going to be a little warmer than it was before because it will have converted a lot of the energy that it had moments before the impact into thermal energy, which is the random jittering of atoms and molecules in the ball. It will be hotter, and you can actually measure the increase in temperature so that it's tiny in this case, but you can see it happen. So that's it. The energy never left the ball. It's still there. It's just getting more and more degraded into thermal energy. And finally, when it's sitting on the ground, it's all thermal energy. Is that okay? So make sure that I finish the story with respect to ramps. What ramps do for you is they allow you to do the work, for example, of lifting a grand piano, my story in the baby grand, in the book, but to the second floor. That requires a very specific amount of work because you're going to take the piano from this height, lift it, stretch the force of gravity a certain amount, and then deliver it. It's going to go from motionless to motionless, so its kinetic energy isn't part of the story. It's just that lifting. You're basically going to invest a certain amount of overall energy in the piano. You can do it on a ladder with a large supporting force exerted for a short distance, the length of the ladder. Or you can do it on a ramp with a gentle force, just enough to compensate, to cancel the ramp force, but you have to travel a long distance. So a small force, long distance. And this is me trying to play graphics. So if you go up a ladder, you're going to lift that piano with a huge force exerted for a small distance. If you go on a steep ramp, you're going to do it with a medium force and a medium distance. If you go on a shallow ramp, you're going to do it with a gentle force but a huge distance. Same force. An object's energy is strictly state dependent. That is, you can look at an object in a certain situation and you can do an inventory of all its pieces of energy. How fast is it traveling? So basically, how much kinetic energy it's got? Okay, 7 units. How high is it? Oh, it's 3 feet off the level that I'm going to call 0. So it's got a certain amount of gravitational potential energy. How flexed is it? What kind of elastic energy is it? You can sum it all up by looking at it. So the energy in a piano that's going to go from the ground say the sidewalk outside your house or apartment to the second floor apartment, the energy before is that inventory for a low-lying piano, one near the ground. And the inventory for the second state, the subsequent state when it's in the apartment, is a different inventory because now it's higher. And you can just simply take those the energies you calculated by doing the inventory, and you'll compare them, and you go, wow, it's a 10,000 units higher when it got up there. To get from one place to the other, something's going to have to invest that 10,000 units of energy. And it turns out it doesn't matter how you get it up there. It's always going to be 10,000 units. Whether you go up a ladder, whether you go along a ramp, whether you shoot it up there with a cannon, it's going to take 10,000 units. And that fact is often, finally, for physicists, is very useful. You can see that it went from here to there. You needed this much energy. It came from somewhere. Let's track it down. Yeah. Why is the work on a steep ramp more equal? This is, I'm only trying to be illustrative, not quantitatively accurate. On the steep ramp, here's first, before I wreck it, this is the gentle ramp. It takes very gentle force, but a very long distance to get any decent height, any decent elevation. But if I make the ramp now way steeper, I'm accumulating height pretty fast, but there's a cost. I have to pull harder to go up the steep ramp. So what my fun and games with font sizes is trying to say is that if you're on a shallow ramp, the force you use is small. But the cost is that you have to travel long distance along that shallow ramp to get any altitude. On the other hand, if you use a steep ramp, you have to use a larger force, but the distance you travel along that ramp to get, again, the altitude is shorter. And to put this in perspective, something that matters is like the ramp for disabled people, the ramps for disabled people. There's regulation of the length of the ramp versus its rise, which is just another way of saying how steep it is. They can't be steeper than a certain value, or they're not okay by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's because beyond a certain steepness, a certain fraction of the people, say in wheelchairs, will not be able to get up it. They can't summon the forces necessary to go up that at constant velocity. And so if you've got room, there's a certain steepness that's max. It's just beyond that, it's forbidden. And if you don't have much room, there's a clause that allows you to have a steeper ramp, but it's also got restrictions and stuff. So you see on the ramps, particularly the ones that were retrofitted into buildings built before this was an issue, well, before it was recognized as an issue, they'll have ramps that go back and forth because they basically don't have the length to put in a ramp of the appropriate steepness. Is that okay? All right. So ramps, in part, it's the story of support forces and these ramp forces. In part, it's the introduction of this important conserved quantity known as energy. And we'll see energy a zillion places for the rest of the semester. I want to show you the next slide's worth just mentioning briefly. Come on, this slide. In K through 12 somewhere, probably like in third, fourth, fifth grade, something like that, you encountered simple machines and the discussion of listing them. Like there's the inclined plane, which is a fancy name for ramp. There's a screw, a pulley. I forget the whole list, right? This is familiar to you, right? They still teach this. Most of the simple machines, their purpose in life, or not life, but I give them life, okay? Their reason for being is what's known as mechanical advantage. And what they're doing is they're a lever. They're allowing you to do work. That is, to invest, add, or subtract energy from something, and to do it with a different balance of force and distance. So, for example, you can't lift something because it's too heavy for you. You can't lift it directly straight up. You can use one of the simple machines to do the work of lifting it. You can't beat the system and and elevate it without doing the required work, physics will, in our universe, will absolutely not allow it. Getting that piano to the second floor is going to require 10,000 units of work, no matter what. But you can have a different trade-off of how hard you have to push versus how far you have to exert that force for. And so levers, ramps, screws, wedges, they're all allowing you to do the work you have in mind with a different pairing of force and distance. More force, less distance, less force, more distance, you get to change it. And that's why they're useful. The ramp is a case where you can do the lifting with less force over a longer distance. The product of the two, the force on the distance, it's going to be the same because you're doing the same work, but you get to exchange it. And then the catch-all name for this kind of game of trade the distance for the force or vice versa is mechanical advantage. And so if you look at a toolbox, half the tools are about mechanical advantage, trying to allow you to do things that are difficult to do with the current balance between force and distance and get a different balance. Is that okay? I do realize I have two things I got to say about energy and work before I let this go. One is that by convention, when I talk about doing work on something, unless I say otherwise, it's always a positive amount. So I'm doing work on it, I'm doing negative work. I don't have to say positive work. Positive work is the default. And I would never say deliberately that I'm doing work on the ball now. I'll explicitly say I'm doing negative work. Now, why do this? Partly for convenience and partly because it's actually, you're used to it too. When you give money to charity, by default, in convention, we're talking about a positive amount. If you give your mortgage to a charity and expect them to pay it off for you and say, I gave to charity. You can follow that's not so good. You give them all your gambling debts. It's not going to go over well. So by definition, when you do work, it's a positive amount. This will show up in the questions of various places, saying in which case are you doing work, and one of the answers will be this. And no, I'm not doing work on it. I'm doing negative work on it. It matters. Okay, so usually language I don't care. I don't care to judge you based on language, but this is one of these cases. Yeah, get the language right. Okay, so that's the last thing I want to say is that energy has units like most physical quantities, and the unit for energy in the metric system, the unit that matters, is the Newton meter. So what's that mean? A Newton is a unit of force. It's the metric unit of force, right? It's about the weight of a small apple, conveniently enough. So I'm currently exerting an upward force in this ball of, I should be able to calculate, but about 50 newtons. 49 newtons. We measured it the other day. 49 newtons, and I'll move it about a meter. I did about 49 Newton meters, force times distance, of work on it just then. I added 49 units of energy, and the unit is a Newton meter. That unit is so valuable to physicists. It's given a shorthand name. It's called a joule, after a physicist named Joule. So not like the singer or the thing you have on your finger, but Joule, joule. So this is 49 joules of energy in, 49 joules of energy out. These are not completely unfamiliar things to you. If you have a light bulb that consumes 100 joules every second, that is literally a 100-watt bulb. A watt is a unit of power, which is energy per time. So it's a 100-watt consumer thing is 100 joules every second. 100 joules per second, that's 100 watts. All right? So I think I fleshed everything out.